Chapter 3 Ben Narnian. Tashi finds his voice.
Now, I always like to get a wee kip on the car journey to the hill, so I usually spread myself out in the back seat and let the aspiring pack leader do the driving. This way, I'm well rested and raring to go by the time we get to where we're going. Now, I guess it must have been just after 10 when we arrived at the car park at Succoth. And luckily, we had nae trouble finding a space this time. Now, the APL likes to take his time getting ready for the AF, so I usually bark like blazes, and this gets right on his goat right enough. But I still reckon we get away that wee bit quicker than we would if I didn't do it. Aspiring pack leader. That's my nickname for old Davy the mountain boy. Well, tell me this. What dog, in its right mind, would have a big fearty for that as his pack leader? Now, most of you will be familiar with the route to Ben Narnian, so I won't bore you with too many details. We could have climbed this one back in January, but the APL was busy playing it with David Bailey with his new camera, and we ran out of time. So I'm well up for it today. The first section up the new path is hot going, and I took it a bit easy like. Mind you, I wasn't the only one feeling the heat. We'd only been going for about half an hour when we ran into 3 boys from Edinburgh having a fag break. I tried to scrounge some food after them, but there was nothing doing. So I gave them a right dirty look, and I tried to pee in one of their rucksack. The APL can be a right killjoy, and he saw what I was up to and dragged me away. When we reached the weir at the top of the path, there was a nice breeze blowing, so I was able to start really motoring. We'd just about reached the Narnian boulders when bingo, I find myself in the lead. And at first, I can't work out what I've done wrong. And then I saw one of those furry white dogs that go ba ba instead of woof woof. Now, I want to chase them, but of course I can't do it, 'cause I'm on my lead. He has this new method where he puts the handle of my flexi lead through the belt of his rucksack, and that way it leaves his front legs free. Don't know why he bothers. He doesn't use these front legs that much anyway. We made our first stop at the Bealach Maim. The APL tries to palm me off with some doggy donut crap for Fainsbury's, but I'm no having it. He's got a nice piece of gammon on his sandwiches, and that'll do me nicely. On the way up to Bender Lane, I stop in to take in the view, and that's when I spot the big boy with the red gaiters. I could see the big fat boy was checking us out like as he stomped towards us, and I just knew he was thinking, what's that daft wee dog doing up here? So I ran at him, barking like one of them mad evil devil dogs. The APL gave me a right bawling out for doing it. Mind you, it was worth it, just to wipe the superior smirk off that big boy's face. Now, just before we got to the summit, we come across a load of boulders, and I was just wondering how I was going to get over them, when he lifts me right up off my feet and puts me under his arm. Now, I can't stand it when he does that. It makes me look like a right wee numpty. Of course, I couldn't do anything, in case he dropped us. Anyway, we made it up through the rock field, no problem, and then he let me off the lead again for that last leg to the summit cairn. I was having nae luck trying to scrounge a tasty morsel off a group of baggers frae Aberdeen, when one of them asked the APL, how many Monroes has the daft wee dog done? Now, you would think he would know this, but does he hell? If they'd asked him how many he'd done, ye can be well sure it would have come trippingly off his tongue. I was not a happy boy, I can tell ye. And that's when I decided to pee on that big boy's leg. He wasn't happy about me scenting him right enough, but who's going to remonstrate with a wee cutie pie like me, eh? The descent proved uneventful until we stopped for a snack beneath that wee loching near the Bealach o' Mame. I got bored here, and I decided to have a good bark. And that's when I unwittingly released the sleeping phantom hounds of the cobbler. The APL tried to tell me it was just an echo. Aye, sure, pull the other one, mountain boy. I've got 4 of them.
Chapter 4. Tashi discovers the joy of the chase. When Tashi was just a puppy, we attended doggy obedience classes at Knightswood Community Centre. Tashi's recall was exceptional for a 16-week-old dog, and he was easily the star of the class. He liked to go through the tunnel and do all the agility stuff, but he saw the prancing, shoring, start and stop walk in the lead as an entirely pointless affair. I felt much the same way, I suppose, and we were easily the dullards of the class. So Knightswood's answer to the dog whisperer decided to humiliate us in front of the whole class by displaying his superior dog handling skills. Boy, did he regret that arrogant assumption. Tashi made a fool out of him. Mum attended the classes with me for moral support, so she was witness to the events, and I think hers was the first chuckle heard in the hall that night. Caesar's first round of the circuit was very poor. His second was no better, and you could see the irritation in his eyes by then. By the third round, Tashi had decided that his new handler was a right plonker, and he just sat down and stubbornly refused to move. Caesar tried to drag him, and the class were by now trying to stifle their laughter. It all ended in complete fiasco when an unwise Yorkshire Terrier made a nippy lunge at Tashi, who of course reciprocated, and although my boy didn't lay a tooth on the dog, it began to whimper and whine like a pussy, and Caesar nearly fell over trying to keep a hold of the wee man's lead. There was now open laughter in the class, and our superhero's face was looking rather flushed. My boy was led back to me angrily, and his lead thrust into my hand. He's a stubborn wee bugger, and you better watch that nasty streak he has. On the ride home, Mum and I had a good chuckle about the events, and we decided Tashi had graduated the class with flying colours. I know some of my friends and family have made fun of my woeful pack leadership skills, and I have no complaint about that. But I will point out one thing: Tashi's recall. It was pure gold star. In hundreds of trips to the hills, he never failed to come back to me when called. Okay, on 2 occasions he was temporarily distracted by the hunt, but he came back eventually, and I learned to stop chasing after him. The first of those recall failures happened on Meal Buoy, and that day Tashi turned dingo on me. Tashi had always been very curious about sheep, but it wasn't until March 2008 that he discovered that these apparently dim-witted fluffy white dogs would run away from him. And when they did, he discovered the pure primal joy of the pursuit. Meal Buoy is a Graham, which means it exceeds 2,000 feet, but is under 2,500 feet. Anything over that and under 3,000 feet is classed as a corvette. We Scots do seem to have a passion for listing our hills. And we also have Tumps, Humps, Marlins and Donalds, to name but a few. There is a good track that eases your way up Mealbury from the car park near the summit of the Glen Ogle Road. Being inherently prone to taking the lazy option, this route held much appeal for me, and that was most certainly not the case with the pathless route that Andrew Dempster describes in his Guide to the Grahams. Now, as a responsible dog owner, I am always very careful when sheep are around, but I briefly let my guard down that day, and very nearly lost Tashi.
So how come you've got me on the lead, big yin, when you're always bragging how good my recall is?
There's sheep in those fields, Tashi, and you've been showing too much predatory interest in them recently.
Oh, come on, mountain boy. They're much bigger than me, and I'm just curious about them. And how come they don't bark like normal dogs, eh?
Well, that's because they're sheep and not dogs.
Oh, so is that why they go ba-ba, and no woof, woof? By the way, big yin, a good pack leader has to have trust in his canine superior.
The planned easy ascent proceeded well, until we came to a gate at the top of the track. There I unclipped Tashi from his lead, and then turned to close the gate behind us. But just as I turned around again, a flock of 4 sheep emerged from behind a little knoll, and on seeing Tashi they freeze. Tashi stands his ground, and then steps slowly towards them. If he gets too close to them, then they will inevitably bolt, and Tashi will not be able to resist his instinct. He will chase them. I gently ease the rucksack from my back and call his name softly. He turns around towards me, but almost as soon as he does, the sheep take flight, and an epic chase ensues. At first I am left for dead, wholly astounded by the suddenness of my wee man's wild pursuit. I can only watch impotently as he leaps across peat bogs and gallops over the heather like a little lion chasing down his prey. Springing into action at last, I now hurtled downwards after him, screaming his name, but to no avail. I nearly catch up with him at a sheepfold, where Tashi has managed to herd his flock into one corner, and now seems confused about what comes next. I am just clutching towards his collar with his lead, when the flock bolts again, and Tashi is after them in a flash. I am soon left trailing in the wake of this renewed pursuit, and Tashi and his flock disappear from sight. I fall to my knees in abject despair, lungs heaving. Old Two Legs is now officially out of the chase. I genuinely think that I have lost him at this point, and my imagination starts to contemplate an awful fate for him, should he encounter an irate farmer with a gun. Just as the first tears are stinging my eyes, I look up, and there he is, prancing towards me, and obviously wondering why I had given up on such a wonderful chase.
Hey, what happened to you, mountain boy? Did you run out of steam?
With utter relief, I silently secure his lead to his collar, and then realise that my rucksack remains where I dropped it at the start of the chase, which means it will have to be recovered. By luck, I have been clutching the flexi lead in my right hand, and somehow had managed not to drop it. Pumping adrenaline, we make light work of the steep climb back up to retrieve my gear. I was still so astonished by the physical athleticism I had just witnessed from my little mountain dog that I said nothing to admonish him. It was always hard to be angry with Tashi, and after all, he chose to come back to me when I'd almost given up on him. Secretly, I was full of awe and admiration at what that small dog was capable of. And he was, to my mind, at far more danger from the flying hooves of the sheep than they were from wee Tashi's gnashers. We of course continue on to the summit, having more or less climbed the hill twice in one day, by different routes. Tashi was naturally very pleased with himself, and still buzzing Dingo from the chase, and the picture I took of him standing proudly on top of Mealbuoy is perhaps the best I ever took, as it captures the spirit of a little lion of Tibet. While I take photographs of the awesome view before me, Tashi is tethered to the small cairn, but even so, his absolute delight and joy in the aftermath of his first hunt have him rolling around in the heather and grunting and snorting with pleasure, the way Apsos do. I had learned not to underestimate Tashi's physical capacity, and that was the last time he ever chased sheep. Thereafter he would not be trusted off the lead in their vicinity. The second recall failure came a few weeks later, on a beautiful warm spring day in early April. Ben Tirren and its subsidiary summit the Goat were the chosen objectives. I had thought of going up to Ullapool to do a couple of easy Munros, but this would have required an overnight stay, and given his deplorable record with tents, I decided to delay this dubious pleasure for another day. Instead, we opted to head up to Glen Clover to clock up my 50th Corvette. We arrived at the huge car park next to the Clover Hotel at around 10:45. There was hardly a cloud in the sky, but a strong breeze would ensure that things didn't get too hot. My friend Wolf had reported seeing signs stating "No dogs without leads." These were absent, but there was a new sign asking us to keep dogs off the grass. I assumed this referred to the grass around the car park and not the hill. We were off by 11, with a great deal of disgruntled barking from my canine companion. He was on his lead. "Hey, what's going on here, mountain boy? There's nane of those fluffy white things about, so why am I on the lead?" "I'm complying with local regulations, Tashi. Didn't you see the signs?" "You know fine well I canna read." "Oh, that is a shame." A great path ensued quick progress up to Loch Brandy, and there we are presented with our first route choice of the day. The loch is a beautiful spot to linger at, so a lengthy stop was made to take in the view of the magnificent Cairngorm Mountains, which were still holding much of their winter snow. From here you can either continue via the Snub, a fairly steep option, or you can climb the easier slopes on the western side of Loch Brandy on a good path, which takes you all the way up to the summit of Green Hill. No prizes for guessing I took the gentler incline. Now well above the hotel, and with no sheep sighted, Tashi was released from his loathsome lead, and was soon charging up the mountainside. The unremarkable summit of Greenhill was quickly achieved, and here another short halt is made, to take in the extensive views and to contemplate the onward route to Ben Tirren and the Goat. I reckoned this would be a dawdle, with just less than 3 kilometres to go, and only 90 metres of height to be gained. Alas, Tashi has other ideas. We had no sooner left the summit, when suddenly he veers off to the left, and begins circling down the hillside, obviously in pursuit of something. But what? I certainly couldn't see any sheep. Bawling his name achieved absolutely nothing, and the chase continued. For a small dog, he covers the ground with remarkable speed and incredible agility, and there was no way I could catch him, not with a 200-metre head start on me. Despair was being entertained, and I kept on losing sight of him due to the undulating moorland. Eventually we do catch sight of each other, and I make a big play of taking off my rucksack and putting it down methodically, a sign Tashi interprets as meaning time for lunch. After a pause to consider his options, he comes charging back up the hillside like an express train. I would gladly have throttled him at this point, but I had to reward him with a slice of ham for coming back. While he enjoyed the afterglow of the chase, and gorged himself on ham slices, I slipped his lead on. After an early lunch, we trudge our way back up to the plateau, and now come across a path which seemed to be heading towards our corbett. Now, rather than take the prudent course and consult the map, on misplaced instinct, and at the same time breaking one of my golden rules, I decide to follow the path. Alas, all too soon, it is apparent that this path will take us down to Loch Worrell. However, the direct route from here will mean crossing an extensive area of bog and shallow peak hags, most unpleasant ground. More height is lost endeavouring to avoid this. I of course apportion blame to Tashi. Losing unnecessary altitude is always guaranteed to irk this aspiring pack leader. After a relatively sullen trudge, with the only mishap being Tashi's unfortunate discovery of a bog that wouldn't take his weight, Man and Apso arrive at the low point, directly between the summits of the Goat and Ben Tirren. The Goat is the lower of the two summits, and we visit it first, and then it's onwards to Ben Tirren, corbett number 50 for me. A descent can be made to Whean from here, but that means a 3-kilometre trudge on a tarmac road back to Clover. After consulting the map, I decide to head back across the plateau via Whitehill, and by keeping well to the right, we avoid the rougher terrain and endure minimal height loss. At a beautiful little lochen, close to the summit of Whitehill, we encounter some mountain hares. From his reaction, it's obvious that this was what Tashi had been chasing earlier. Despite the minor recall mishap, it was a great day, and it was only on the descent back down to Clover that we met anyone. If Ben Tirren was just 19 metres higher, then it would have been a very different story, because then it would qualify for Monroe status.